going on with our Victorian age or Victorian era. Today we are going to study about eminent prose writers during the Victorian age. Very famous prose writers during the Victorian age. Prose writers, in this class we are studying the writers of essays and treatises. See, first of all, we are taking into account the eminent prose writer Thomas Carlyle. Thomas Carlyle, Carlyle, Carlyle. His period was between 1795 and 1881. Yes, he was born in 1795. Thomas Carlyle. Carlyle was educated at Edinburgh University in Scotland. Edinburgh University. Edinburgh. Where was he educated? He was educated at Edinburgh University in Scotland. Then after his education, for a time he became a school teacher. For some time, for a little while, he was a school teacher. He became a school teacher. After a few years of teaching, he abandoned the profession. He gave up the profession of teaching and moved to Edinburgh. He shifted to Edinburgh in Scotland. He was very poor in means. Economically, he was very poor. He had a very poor financial backgrounds. He was poor in means and wretched in health. He was wretched or miserable in health. He was suffering from ill health. And he also suffered from some mental problems, such as he suffered from doubts. His mind was full of baseless doubts, uncertainties. He was always anxious about the things which are yet to happen. So he was full of uncertainties and spiritual conflicts. Here there was a tug of war going on in his mind with the spiritual conflicts. His spiritual conflicts and the restoration of faith. The spiritual conflict in his mind and later the restoration of faith. Faith in God and religion. Faith and especially in God. Restoration and restoration of faith are expressed in Sartor Resartus. His married life with Jane Welsh was happy. In the year 1884, the Carlyles, he and Jane Welsh, settled permanently in Chelsea. Chelsea, a small district in England. Chelsea. He came back to England and settled in Chelsea, a very small district in England. He gave lectures far and wide. The universities and other places, and wrote profusely. He wrote a large number of essays and treatises and books, prose works. And he died in the year 1881 in Chelsea, the place where he had settled in his later years, Chelsea. In which year did he die? He died in 1881 in Chelsea. Then about Carlyle. Carlyle was a writer with immense German influence. He was greatly influenced by German writings. Carlyle was a writer with immense, great, large, lavish German influence. He translated Goethe's, Goethe, Goethe, the famous German writer. He translated Goethe's Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship. Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, a work by Goethe. It was translated by Thomas Carlyle into English. He also wrote in German language, and also very interestingly, he wrote in German language. He was very proficient in German language also. He wrote in German language the life of Schiller. The life of Schiller. Schiller, a writer. Then he had a great friendship with Emerson, the American Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great American writer and thinker. Emerson, American. He had a great friendship with him, Emerson. You know, Thomas Carlyle lived during the time of Industrial Revolution. It was a time of Industrial Revolution. But Carlyle had a transcendental view. Transcendental. Transcendental means, transcend means to go beyond. Transcendental view means a kind of spiritual view of the world, not materialistic. Carlyle always had a transcendental view about the world rather than materialistic view. That means he viewed world beyond everyday ordinary experiments. He was viewing the world beyond everyday ordinary experiments. What does the word transcend mean? To go beyond. He had a spiritual view of the world. So thus he had a spirituality. He never believed in the materialistic way of the world. Remember that. He had a transcendental view about the world in which he was living. Then now let us see the early works of Thomas Carlyle. Number 1, Signs of the Times. It was a collection of essays. Signs of the Times was a collection of essays. Then the second one we already found, I already told you about the book Sartor Resartus. Sartor Resartus, which came out in the year 1830. 1830 it came out. Then the French Revolution in 3 volumes. He brought out a work on the French Revolution which broke out in France in the year 1789 in 3 volumes. It was published in the year 1837. 1837. Which book? The French Revolution in 3 volumes. See, when we examine the book, we can see that, or critics saw that the book was not purely historical. The book was not purely historical in the modern sense. It was written in a pictorial and dramatic style, almost like a novel. The French Revolution, he brought out the features, causes and effects and other backgrounds of the French Revolution in a pictorial and dramatic style. Who? Thomas Carlyle. Then the completed draft of the French Revolution, the manuscript of the French Revolution, was accidentally banned by J.S. Mills Maid. Don't you remember J.S. Mill, the philosopher of utilitarianism? J.S. Mills Maid accidentally banned the whole manuscript and work. But he was determined and he rewrote the whole thing. Thomas Carlyle rewrote, or him recreated the whole thing. Whole book was recreated. Such a Herculean task was behind the work, the French Revolution, in 3 volumes. Then another work, Chartism. Chartism he brought out in the year 1840. So you know, Chartism we have studied when we found the political and social background of England. It was a working class movement for political reform which existed from 1848 to 1857. 1848 to 1857. Chartism. Then about the work Chartism, it contributed to the emergence of a series of debates which the spiritual and material foundation of England. So the work contributed to the emergence of series of debates about the spiritual and material foundation of England. That's all. Once again, you know, the work Chartism, which was out in the year 1840, it contributed to a series of debates about the spiritual and material foundation of England. And he contributed the phrase You know, in the year 1837, he contributed the phrase, the condition of England question. The condition of England question. It became almost a phrase. The condition of England question. It was coined by, it was introduced by, contributed by Thomas Carlyle. What does it mean? The phrase coined by Carlyle in the year 1837 describes the condition of the proletarian or the working class during the Industrial Revolution. It refers to the condition of the proletariat or the working class during the Industrial Revolution. It became a phrase and so many people began to use this phrase. What is the phrase? The condition of England question. The condition of England, it also became a phrase. The phrase was coined by, made by, contributed by Thomas Carlyle. Which phrase? The condition of England question. The work by Thomas Carlyle, which was brought out in the 1840, had a great influence on a number of writers of fiction in the Victorian era and after. Chartism had a deep impact on a number of writers during his period and after. Then later works of Thomas Carlyle. An important work on heroes and hero worship and the heroic in history. A long title, of course, on heroes and hero worship and the heroic in history, which was published in the year 1840. And latter day pamphlets, not later, latter, L-A-T-T-E-R, latter day pamphlets, which was published in the year 1850. Then Shooting Niagara and After. Shooting Niagara and After. That is also an important work by him. Shooting Niagara and After. Then we can examine the characteristic features of his works. What are the characteristics or the features of Thomas Carlyle's works? Carlyle is considered to be a sage. He is considered to be a sage or a spiritual man with spiritual elements. Carlyle is considered to be a sage in moral and political affairs. He was almost a sage, a hermit or a sannyasi in moral and political affairs. He bitterly condemned, he bitterly hated the hypocrisy and insincerity of the society of his age. Thomas Carlyle bitterly condemned the hypocrisy and insincerity of the conventional society of his age. He never liked hypocrisy and insincerity. He was against these negative qualities. To him, democracy was the last word of unwisdom. He pointed out that democracy was the last word of unwisdom. Wise, that means wise people will never resort to. Wise people will never advocate democracy. That was his point. Similarly, Dr. Johnson has said, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. Similarly, Thomas Carlyle has said, democracy, what is democracy according to him? Carlyle pointed out that democracy was the last word of unwisdom. Carlyle repeatedly pointed out that the masses needed the guidance and leadership of the hero. The masses, the common people, always needed the guidance and the leadership of a hero or a man of great ability or an able man. That was his thinking. What did he think about the leadership? What was his point in leadership? He repeatedly in his essay, through his essays and treatises, he repeatedly pointed out that the masses needed the guidance and leadership of the hero or the able man. Carlyle's message shows that he was a great revolutionary thinker. So these messages by Carlyle, which he enunciated through his essays, show that He was a great revolutionary thinker. He was a revolutionary thinker. Then Carlyle's style is entirely his own. He never borrowed the style of anybody in his writings. It was a spontaneous style of his own. Carlyle's style is entirely his own. He expresses his own genius and intense conviction. Thomas Carlyle expresses or reveals his own genius and his own conviction, his own understanding in his own vivid and picturesque way. In his own vivid, very clear and picturesque way. That is what Carlyle does through his essays. Once again, he expresses his own genius, not a borrowed genius, and his own intense, deep, strong conviction in his own vivid and picturesque way. Flexibility, that is flexibility, bendability, suppleness or bendability is an outstanding characteristic of his style. When we examine his style deeply, we can see that flexibility was a great point, a great characteristic or great feature in his style. He can be calm and persuasive. He can write in a calm way, but his writings were highly persuasive, deeply influencing or compelling, revolutionary type. He can be calm and persuasive simultaneously or at the same time. He is conversational and can be humorous. Most of his essays are in a conversational way, like those of Charles Lamb or E.V. Lucas. But most of his treatises and essays are humorous also. So these are the characteristic features of Thomas Carlyle. Study these things. Now let us study about another important prose writer during the Victorian age. Thomas Babington Macaulay. Thomas Babington Macaulay, or he is also called Lord Macaulay. He was born in the year 1800 and died in 1859. 1859. Lord Macaulay or Thomas Babington Macaulay. You remember him? He was he advocated for the teaching of English in India. Remember that? Macaulay contributed a number of essays to Edinburgh Review, a famous magazine during the time, Edinburgh Review. Macaulay contributed or gave a number of essays to Edinburgh Review. He wrote for mental recreation. He was not in need of money because he was a well-to-do man, so he didn't need money. He wrote for mental pleasure. He wrote for mental recreation. He wrote about French and English history. He wrote about French history as well as English history, but they had no accuracy of fact. The historical works had no accuracy of fact. You should remember, he wrote about French and English history, but they had no accuracy of fact. His essays are of two kinds. We can classify his essays into two kinds. His essays are of two kinds. Those dealing with the literary subjects, such as essays on Bunyan. See, first one, those essays dealing with the subjects, literary subjects. The essays dealing with the literary subjects, such as essays on Bunyan, John Bunyan, the author of Pilgrim's Progress, Addison, Joseph Addison, essayist, poet and playwright. Then Bacon, Francis Bacon, the essayist, famous essayist. Johnson, Dr. Johnson, the compiler of English dictionary. Then Goldsmith, an Irish writer who wrote The Vicar of Wakefield, famous novel, etc. And he also wrote about the subjects dealing with Byron also. So we can classify his essays of two kinds. Those dealing with the literary subjects, such as essays on Bunyan, Addison, Bacon, Johnson, Goldsmith and Byron. And the second type, second classification, those dealing with the historical studies, including his famous essays on Lord Clive and Warren Hastings. So second type of essays deal with the historical studies or the historical subjects, including his famous essays on Lord Clive and Warren Hastings. His magnum opus, but his magnum opus, the great work of lasting merit, or the greatest work in fiction or poetry is usually called magnum opus. Magnum opus, a great work of lasting merit. His magnum opus, History of England, in 5 volumes. His great, or perhaps his greatest work is History of England in 5 volumes. That is his memorable work. Then about Macaulay's style is energetic, vivid and picturesque. We can use 3 adjectives regarding his style. Macaulay's style is energetic, not dull and boring, vivid and picturesque. And he is entirely direct. He never wrote in a roundabout manner. He is entirely direct and clear. He used short, detached sentences. He used short and detached, separate sentences full of allusions. He was highly allusive in his writings. He used a lot of allusions in his writings. He used very short and detached, separate sentences full of allusions. So this much about Thomas Babington Macaulay. Then another important prose writer during the Victorian age is John Ruskin. One of the most famous essays and writer of treatises and also plays. John Ruskin. His period was between 1819 and 1900. 1819 and 1900. His period. He was born in the year 1819. So John Ruskin was born in 1819 in London. Where was he born in London? In which year? 1819. He was educated privately before he went to Oxford. Before going to Oxford for his collegiate education, he was taught almost privately at home. He had private studies. He was educated privately at home before he went to Oxford. His father was a rich wine merchant. Ruskin's father was a rich wine merchant. He was immensely rich. At Oxford, he won the Newdigate Prize. We studied earlier, Newdigate Prize, for his poem Salsette and Elephant. For his poem Salsette, Salsett and Elephant, 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 he was able to win the Newdigate Prize when he was a student at Oxford. It was a prize given to the undergraduate students at Oxford. He was able to win it. Yes, John Ruskin was a highly influential polymath. What does polymath mean? A man with a wide range of knowledge. I asked such a question to you in my earlier class. He was highly influential polymath, art critic, draftsman, one who makes drawings of buildings and bridges, etc. Draftsman, art patron, social thinker, and philanthropist. Philanthropist means a lover of mankind, one who does so many good things for the benefit of the society. Philanthropist, lover of mankind. He was a highly influential polymath, art critic, draftsman, art patron, social thinker, and philanthropist. He wrote subjects ranging from geology, architecture, myth, ornithology. Ornithology means the scientific study of birds. ornithology, literature, education, botany and political economy. He wrote about a varied subject. He wrote about a variety of subjects like geology, architecture, myth, ornithology, literature, education, botany and political economy. And he also wrote essays, treatises, poetry, lectures, travel guides, manuals, letters, and even a fairy tale he wrote. He wrote even a fairy tale, a grandma story, fairy tale. He wrote essays, treatises, poetry, lectures, travel guides, manuals, letters, and even a fairy tale he wrote. In all his writings, he emphasized the connections between nature, art and society. So he was an exponent of the connection between art, nature and society. In all his writings, whatever things he wrote, everywhere we could see the emphasized connections, the great connections. He emphasized the connections between nature, art and society. And later he increasingly focused on social and political issues. In his later years, he focused on the political and social issues of his age. So in all his writings, he emphasized the connections among nature, art and society, and later he increasingly focused on social and political issues. And he was also a lover of painting. He also painted. He was a painter also. That is why he had an association with the PRB, Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. In our earlier class we studied that. He made detailed sketches and paintings of rocks. He made sketches and paintings of ROCKs, rocks, plants, birds, landscapes, beautiful landscapes, and architectural structures. As he was a draftsman, he also wrote sketches of architectural structures. He made detailed sketches and paintings of rocks, plants, birds, landscapes and architectural structures. Ruskin influenced the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, Pre-Raphaelitism. He influenced the PRB. Then he maintained ideas on the social utility of art, contrasting with the art for art's sake. You might have heard this dictum, art for art's sake, which became popular in the times. In Victorian era, in the 19th century, there was a popular dictum among the artists known as art for art's sake. That means art has nothing to do with the society. Art is not meant for the society. Art is meant only for the pleasure of the artist. Such a view was there. It was known as art for art's sake. It was the modernistic view of the artist that art has nothing to do with the society. Art does not mean to educate the society. Art is meant for the pleasure of the artist. Ruskin was against it. And also the Pre-Raphaelites were also against this. Ruskin made his statement that, he made his point very clear that art is meant for the social utility. Art has some social utility, otherwise it is never called an art. It can never be called as an art form. See what he say, what was his opinion about art? See, he maintained ideas on the social utility of art. Art has social utility. Art must be useful to the society. That was his demand, which contrasted the art for art's sake, which became popular in that time. He attacked a Darwinian theory. He was also, as a spiritual man, As a man of strong faith, he was never pleased with Darwinian theory. He attacked Darwinian theory, but he respected his personality. He respected Darwin. He respected Darwin's personality, but he attacked his theory. He became a professor of fine arts. He became a professor of fine arts at the University of Oxford. Then he founded the guild. He established a guild or association of Saint George. Guild of Saint George. It was an organization meant for the social improvements. Which guild? Guild of Saint George. And this association of people, association of great people, was meant for the improvements of the society or social improvements. He suffered prolonged bouts of mental illness. He was, in his later years, he was suffering from prolonged periods of mental bouts, periods of mental illness, and died in Lake District. He died in the place Lake District in 1900 at the age of 80. At the time of his death, he was 80 years of age. Then his works, modern painters. The Seven Lamps of Architecture, which came out in the year 1849. The Seven Lamps of Architecture. The Stone of Venice. The Stone of Venice, which he started in 1851 and came out 2 years later in 1853. Two PATHS, which came out in the year 1859, and his most important work, his famous work, which is even asked in PSC questions, Unto This Last, which came out in the year 1861. Unto This Last. Then Munira Pulveris, which came out in the year 1862. And Time and Tide by Wear and Tide. Time and Tide, T-A-D, by Wear, W-E-A-R, Wear and T-Y-N-E, Time, which came out in the year 1867. Fors Clavigeron, which he started writing in 1871 and ended in 1884. It was a series of letters to the working men of England. It was a series of letters he addressed to the working men of England, proletariat of England. Ruskin was a profound and original thinker. Ruskin was a very deep and original thinker. He asserted that true art can be produced only by a nation which is inspired by noble aims and lives a pure, righteous and happy life. See, what is his idea about true art? He declared that, he asserted that true art can be produced only by a nation. True art can be produced only by a nation which is inspired by noble aims. The nation must be inspired by very noble, very pure aims, noble aims, and lives, the nation which should lives a pure, righteous. Righteous means noble and happy life. So this was his assertion about true art. He asserted that true art can be produced only by a nation which is inspired by noble aims and lives a pure, righteous and happy life. Ruskin highlights the importance of work, and also in his essays and treatises he highlights the importance of work, but he promises that work should not be uninspiring. The work which we are engaged in should not be uninspiring. Every work should be inspiring to us. We must have an enthusiasm to do and take and do the work. And what does he say about work? What is his idea about work? He promises that work should not be uninspiring and mechanical. The mechanical work will make ourselves mechanical or ourselves machines. So the work should not be uninspiring and mechanical, but interesting and pleasurable. Work should be very much interesting and pleasurable. Then only we can do the work to our heart's content. Then only we will get a self-satisfaction out of the work we are doing. So this is his view about work. What is his view about work? His view about work is that work should not be uninteresting and mechanical, but interesting and pleasurable. So study about these prose writers, and in our next class we are going to the Victorian novelists, very important. Victorian novelists. Okay.